The Desert War was often described through tanks, commanders, and sweeping movements across the map. But beneath every dramatic armored advance lay a quieter calculation. In North Africa, victory depended on arithmetic. How many tons could be unloaded at a port? How many trucks could carry them forward? How much fuel a tank burned crossing empty ground? And how long a formation could keep moving before its own supply lines strangled it. By early 1942, both sides had learned that the desert did not forgive bad logistics. Rommel could win a tactical success and still run short of fuel, while the British could hold large stocks in Egypt and still struggle to put the right supplies in the right place at the right time. Gazala was therefore never just a battle of armor against armor. It was a battle in which every tank attack had to survive the longer war of transport.
If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore.
The first number that mattered was distance. North Africa stretched the fighting across a vast coastal corridor, with the Mediterranean on one side and the open desert on the other. Armies could move quickly along the coast road or across desert tracks, but the farther they moved from their main bases, the more every mile became a burden. A truck carrying fuel to the front used fuel to get there, used more fuel to return, and wore itself down in the process. If the front moved too far forward, supply transport did not simply become longer, it became less efficient. That was why a successful pursuit could slowly turn into a trap for the army doing the pursuing. For the British, Egypt was the great base. Supplies could come through the Suez Canal, Alexandria, and the Nile Delta, then move west by rail, road, and truck. Compared with the Axis position, this gave the British a deeper and more reliable logistical foundation, especially when they were fighting closer to Egypt. But the advantage weakened as the Eighth Army moved westward into Cyrenaica. Operation Crusader had pushed Axis forces back, but it also pulled British formations farther from their best supply system. By the time the army reached the Gazala area, it had to maintain a front many miles from the main Egyptian base, while also supporting armor, infantry boxes, artillery, engineers, workshops, hospitals, and airfields.
For the Axis, the arithmetic was different but just as unforgiving. German and Italian supplies had to cross the Mediterranean by sea, reach ports such as Tripoli, Benghazi, or smaller Libyan harbors, and then move forward over long road distances. Tripoli was far to the west, and using it meant that supplies had to be hauled across enormous distances before they reached the fighting troops. Benghazi was closer to the front and therefore extremely valuable, but port capacity, air attack, shipping losses, and repair work all limited how much could actually be moved through it. Rommel's army could be tactically brilliant and still remain dependent on a fragile chain that stretched back across sea lanes, docks, roads, and truck parks.
Port capacity was one of the least glamorous but most decisive facts of the Desert Campaign. A port was not just a dot on a map. It was a machine for turning ships into usable military power. It needed cranes, labor, storage areas, roads, fuel handling, repair facilities, and protection from bombing. If a port could unload only a limited amount each day, then an army could not simply wish more supplies into existence. Capturing a port mattered only if it could be used, and using it required time, organization, and security. That is why Tobruk mattered so much in the North African War, and why its fate would hang over the entire Gazala campaign. Fuel was the most obvious supply problem for armored warfare, but it was also one of the easiest to underestimate. Tanks, trucks, armored cars, and recovery vehicles all needed fuel, and desert operations consumed it at frightening speed. Moving across rough ground burned more than moving on good roads, and detours caused by minefields, enemy fire, soft sand, or poor navigation added still more. A commander might order a rapid flanking movement, but the order did not make fuel cans appear at the far end of the route. In practical terms, every armored maneuver carried a hidden question. Could the fuel column reach the fighting column before the fighting column became helpless? Water was even more basic. Soldiers in the desert needed it constantly, and engines needed cooling systems maintained under harsh conditions. Dust, heat, and long movement wore down men and machines alike, and an army that could not supply water could not remain in the field, no matter how brave its troops were. The desert could make simple daily life into a logistical contest. Cooking, washing, medical care, vehicle maintenance, and survival all depended on a supply stream that had to be guarded and moved. The further units pushed away from known routes and dumps, the more exposed they became to thirst, exhaustion, and mechanical failure. Spare parts formed another kind of arithmetic, less visible than fuel, but just as decisive. Tanks broke down in the desert for reasons that had nothing to do with enemy action. Engines overheated, tracks wore out, filters clogged with dust, suspensions suffered, and recovery vehicles struggled to pull damaged machines out of danger. A tank knocked out by enemy fire might be lost, but a tank disabled by mechanical failure could sometimes return to battle if workshops, transporters, fitters, and parts were available. That meant battlefield strength was not only the number of tanks listed before an operation, it was the number that could move, fight, be repaired, and return to action day after day. This is where logistics and tactics became inseparable. A tank brigade could look powerful at the beginning of a battle, but if it fought for several days without adequate repair and recovery, its strength could drain away even without a dramatic defeat. Guns needed ammunition, vehicles needed maintenance, crews needed rest, and commanders needed reliable signals to understand what remained available. In the desert, a unit might be ordered to attack because higher headquarters believed it was still strong, while the unit itself had already lost tanks to breakdowns, damaged tracks, empty fuel tanks, or exhausted crews. Desert arithmetic was often cruel because numbers on a report lagged behind reality on the ground. The British faced a particular challenge in matching their defensive system to their supply system. The Gazala line depended on boxes, minefields, mobile armor, artillery, and air support working together across a broad front. Each defended box needed food, water, ammunition, medical support, engineer stores, and anti-tank ammunition. Each armored formation needed fuel dumps, repair echelons, recovery vehicles, and clear routes of movement. If the boxes held but the armor could not move at the right moment, the system weakened. If the armor moved but supply routes could not keep up, the system burned itself out. The line was therefore not a single position, but a living network that had to be fed constantly.
Rommel's logistical problem was sharper because his style of command often pushed his army to the edge of what supply could support. His advances could dislocate British defenses and create sudden opportunities, but they also carried Axis formations away from their dumps and repair systems. The farther he drove east, the more he depended on capturing supplies, reopening routes, and improvising solutions under fire. That could work brilliantly for a time, especially when British confusion allowed Axis columns to seize ground or stores. But it was dangerous because improvisation is not the same as abundance. A commander can gamble with distance, but trucks, fuel drums, and spare parts still obey arithmetic.
Air power also shaped the supply battle. Aircraft could attack convoys, ports, road movement, and forward dumps, making every logistical route a target. A truck column on a desert road could be as important as a tank formation at the front, because destroying transport might prevent tomorrow's attack more effectively than fighting the tanks directly. Both sides understood this, and the struggle over supply lines extended into the air and onto the sea. Malta, Mediterranean convoys, desert landing grounds, and forward air support all belonged to the same larger story. Armored warfare in North Africa was never only steel on sand. It was also ships, aircraft, dock workers, mechanics, drivers, and engineers. The coming battle at Gazala would show how logistics could turn danger into opportunity and opportunity into danger. Rommel's southern hook around the British line would create a spectacular operational crisis, but it would also place his forces in a perilous position behind minefields and short of secure supply. The British would believe, at moments, that the Axis army had trapped itself and could be destroyed. Yet to destroy a trapped enemy, an army had to concentrate, coordinate, and sustain its own attacks. That required the same fuel, ammunition, transport, and command clarity that the desert was always trying to take away. The Cauldron would become famous partly because it was a tactical battle built around a supply problem. Desert arithmetic matters because it strips armored warfare of illusion. Tanks could move fast, commanders could take risks, and maps could show bold arrows sweeping around flanks. But none of that escaped the weight of fuel, water, spare parts, port capacity, and road distance. At Gazala, the side that seemed tactically favored at one moment might be logistically endangered the next, and the side that seemed trapped might survive if supply routes could be forced open. This was the hidden logic behind the whole campaign, from Rommel's return to the fall of Tobruk. In the desert, victory belonged not simply to the army that advanced, but to the army that could keep advancing, keep repairing, keep drinking, keep firing, and keep enough vehicles moving to fight again the next morning.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.